All right, good morning. Assalamu alaikum. It's really nice to be here. We have an exciting panel today, but I'd like to start with a conversation relating to my topic, which would be around how to make social impact and economic development using blockchain. And hopefully we have a very interesting set of people on our panel, so we're going to get different perspectives of that, inshallah. But yesterday we had a little start of this conversation on how emerging technologies have like a larger role to play in our economies and making impact in economic development. We talked about generally dealing with poverty, dealing with investments in solar and so on. But today I'd like to talk more specifically about things relating to finance, right? Now, one of the things that I covered yesterday was this idea that whenever we have new technologies coming into an environment, technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, VR, AR, mobile banking, and so on, we have a couple of choices. One is to say, how do we do the things that we have done before, but do it more efficiently using the new technology? And the other is to say, what are the things that we could not do before in terms of a larger purpose in economies, right? But just to recap, like there's a lot of things that we can do in blockchain, AI, VR, that can help a traditional banking operation, right? And my company, to introduce myself, is Mocha 7. We are a product innovation studio. And we help clients with enterprise solutions based on emerging tech. So a lot of the solutions that we worked with for banks has been around contract management and auditing, especially Sharia compliance auditing is very much more effective using artificial intelligence, using OCR. It can actually reduce a lot of errors and auditor time. Any bank which has a lot of branches, for example, are seeing a lot of benefits with using virtual reality for training instead of flying people into central locations. We've seen a lot of advances that we discussed yesterday. Some of our panelists talked about KYC can be improved immensely using biometrics and machine learning and so on. Now, these are all great solutions, but my main focus, like outside of Mocha 7, I'm also part of an organization called the Frontrunners League of Social Impact Innovation, and we are a think tank in a club of people who are building products and doing innovation work, but also focused on how to boost our economies and societies. So I'd like to talk very quickly and briefly about things that help with that. There are going to be like more broader conversations around economics, to be honest, but because we are all in the part of, like we are all like at the root of economic growth. All banks and all financial regulators can boost that. That's why I thought this would be a good place to talk about this. So really what, in my opinion, these new technologies have allowed us to do is think about what is now the function of a bank or a financial institution. Because a lot of the past was built on building banks based on values that were considered to be global business values, right? Capitalism as a general westernized concept that we've been bringing into our industries and our countries. And a lot of the conversation that we're seeing now, especially with what is happening because of capitalism in Europe, in the West, in America, is this idea that capitalism by itself, financial instruments by itself, cannot be divorced from or disconnected from the values of the region in which we're operating, right? And our regions, Africa and Asia, are very different in our values and how we work in our communities. We have ideas of coexistence. We have ideas like Ubuntu, like things that bind us together, and how we build trust with each other is very distinctly different from many other regions. And so it's very specifically, new technologies now allow us to ask a question: how can we build better platforms which can enable economic growth that is in line with our values, right? So, as an example, sorry, I think this is, give me 1 minute, sorry. Okay. That's, I'm going to put this aside, this is creating noise. Okay. As an example, development investments, for example, we talked briefly yesterday that there's a huge trend in what's happening around solar, around food tech, around even power generation for developing economies. Right, in the Frontrunners League, there are companies who are building products. Let's say there's one company that's built a product which is a power plant inside of a 18-wheeler truck. And this power plant, which is the size of a shipping container, can power 1,600 homes. So this is a very effective microgrid solution. Instead of building a large power facility in a plant and build distribution grids, you can drive a truck somewhere and power a neighborhood, a village, a small town, place to place. And the same model is being applied to food production, where there's a lot of food production companies that are producing food inside of shipping containers, instead of small farms that you can take the entire farm to a place instead of the traditional supply chain. And companies like Zero Mass is doing the same thing with water production, clean water being produced on site using their technology. Now, developing countries, particularly Pakistan and Africa, will benefit greatly from allowing faster investment in these products and areas, right? However, we need to figure out new creative ways of doing that. So one of the things we discussed yesterday was that using blockchain, you can allow citizens to have fractional ownership of these new types of investments. And by tracking that across thousands of people, you can also offer them dividends and profit returns against investments, right? But a broader thing, and this is part of a conversation I've had with people who are part of managing or advising endowments or large grant authorities and so on. A broader conversation is a lot of VCs, private investors, grant authorities, endowments would be more willing to invest in regions that they find risky currently if they had a better idea of the social ROI, social return on investment, right? And this as a new emerging field is still under research, but this idea that any dollar that you spend in social impact innovation doesn't just have a financial return, but an economic return and an impact return has to be quantified in a way so that we understand it just the way we understand regular ROI, right? So for example, an investment in power and internet, especially in developing countries, is not just about immediate returns. It has cascading returns on the economy. And I've seen this firsthand in multiple economies where the lower middle class economy becomes upper middle class, and it has massive exponential cascading effects. But once we understand social ROI better, and we can quantify it better, and we can present it to endowments better, they will be more willing to take that investment through their financial modeling. Now, blockchain in particular is essential for this type of calculation, because blockchain can record multiple types of transactions, not just financial transactions, but impact reports coming from nonprofits, many different types of reporting that can combine to provide the data that we need. And it is also distributed, so you can have a better traceability across borders of the type of work that you're doing, right? So in my work, we're seeing blockchain as an avenue of enabling this type of conversation and investment framework that wasn't possible before. And I'm really glad to have run into the gentlemen with Finterra who are already working on this type of work with endowments and blockchain, right? So similarly, international trade and finance, I've been advising companies through my work here in Turkey who are building new solutions around international trade. Now, obviously, we all need our economies to boost international trade, and banking can provide a lot of immediate access to funds for SMEs around financing of specific trade agreements, provide small working capital loans at the right time to facilitate the process, right? And if we can do that faster, we will have cascading impact. But a lot of the challenges around why international trade financing can become slow at a SME sort of level is around trust. And it's around how quickly we can build trust and verify that all of the parties involved, the invoice is real, the parties are real, the banks are real, and so on, right? And that process can take weeks. But again, with new technologies such as blockchain, we can build not just a reliability verification platform for things like this, but also we can provide a platform which can provide a lot of trust in the values that individual people are bringing to their business. And so one of the companies here in Turkey that I'm advising has been building a specific platform for reinstalling values in international trade, which is a precursor to accelerating international trade financing. Right? Because this is coming back to our values. Like the way we've done trade in our communities, in our cultures, has always been human to human, person to person. Right? We trust the person before we even talk about business. And a lot of these values have been going away in this international fast economy that we are a part of. So reinstating that at the speed of international trade has been something which has been really hard to do with technology. But nowadays, with emerging technology, we can facilitate this aspect. And I point out why it's important to facilitate this aspect because some of the questions here from yesterday were about, when we use blockchain for finance, there's a lot of questions around security and auditing and other types of things that we are evolving, right? We're solving these questions. But a lot of the economic solutions can be implemented today because they don't have the same necessity of security that financial transactions do, but the economic solutions can in turn speed up financial transactions anyway, right? They can bring new people into the market, new business into the market, which benefits everybody. And one other thing to cover, and I wanted to cover and then talk about how do we get it done. One other thing is credit worthiness, and this is something that I've been advising different regions about as well. The way we look at credit histories of individual people, from a purely financial point of view, is kind of broken because, and credit has a massive implication on the success of individual families, of successful small businesses, who need access to not just capital, but they need access to sometimes emergency funds or anything that can improve their lives. It makes a massive difference at the right economic barrier. But we, in general, speaking from like my background in advising in the West is obviously very clearly measures credit worthiness based on financial strength of returning loans and things like that. But we understand from our values and our cultures that the worth of a person in creditworthiness is very, very different. It's not just his ability to return loans. It's also maybe this person is also helping other people in his neighborhood in very specific ways financially. So that person is more worthy of credit, depending on how you define it, than other people. Now, specifically coming from like my background and Islamic values, like we have this idea of ihsan, which is a very interesting way of measuring who is sort of doing better than others in society. Ihsan being like, going out of your way to help other people. And the people who are the muhsinun are people of stronger values that we should enable and reward, right? Now, in many ways, again, with technology before, it was not possible to build a framework which can adequately measure and record and reward ihsan, or the values that are outside of the values of just financial strength, but also the values of the person, which determine whether or not he is worthy of doing business with and worthy of individual credit, right? But again, with these new technologies, especially blockchain, we have the frameworks, and I've worked on solution architectures for this with different clients in different regions, of frameworks that can help us identify and reward ihsan, which also partner with all types of organizations, from government entities and banks in particular. So as an example, like let's say there's a person who's on the poverty line, and he cannot change his job, he's only making whatever he's making, but he has extra time. And there's two people like that. One of the person wastes his time, the other person spends the time doing ihsan, helping other people in his community. If this person could have a better credit rating, could get better access to loans or leniency in their loans or investment for their business, we can build better societies. Just through small understanding of how we analyze risk, how we analyze creditworthiness, how we understand how fast we can accelerate international trade, we can boost up the people who can become our larger customer base and boost our businesses altogether, right? Now, coming to the how. I've been very fortunate to speak to many people around the world about this, and there's a lot of people who understand the potential opportunity for banks to not just be financial instruments, but key instruments of catalyzing economic growth. And there is precedence, like I said, before Alibaba, there was, maybe at some point they're still operational, but Alibaba is now the main sort of trade engine. But before that, Standard Chartered Bank started B2B exchange, that I'm sure you would have a lot more history on, which was mainly a trading platform, but it facilitated the work that they were doing as a bank, right? So this idea of a bank coming in and starting engines of economic growth that facilitate trade, that facilitate entrepreneurs, that small business landholders, for example, is something that's also happened in Pakistan, for example, where land ownership and a lot of the uncertainty and mistrust were actually being facilitated by banks in those regions, right? Now, practically speaking, different regions have come together to understand the how in a very particularly common way, which is usually a bank conglomerate forms. Multiple banks invest X amount of dollars each, and they form an innovation lab, right? Initially, there used to be fintech innovation labs, and the lab would then create products and technologies that all the banks would have access to, which is a very lower cost and lower risk way of managing, explorations into these technologies. But a new model is the same idea that banks can come together, invest a certain amount of money, but also open up their doors to entrepreneurs and build an innovation lab around these types of activities, right? Things that the banks directly may not want to invest in, but an entrepreneur would be very happy to go and take the risk and build. But because the entrepreneur in these models would have direct access to the banks and their APIs and direct access to the people who are making some of these decisions, they will be able to move much faster than just an entrepreneur who is sitting outside of this ecosystem, right? And so we are currently in the process of building ecosystems like this. We're announcing a project called Project 10X Labs. That's a regional startup innovation accelerator for economic development. And we're doing this in different regions. So we're announcing it in Pakistan. Hopefully we'll do this in Turkey soon enough. And Dubai. And really this is our focus area. The MENA area, the GCC is our focus. But these accelerator verticals are always with corporate partners. So in different regions, depending on the types of innovation that needs to be done, either partnering with CSR divisions or corporate innovation teams to say, let's build this type of cluster where you have the experts. The banks are the experts of trust and the experts of finance and the experts of getting things done from a lot of the back-end logistics that startups need. And there's no denying that. But at the same time, the startups are the experts are dealing with the human issues and how to accelerate that, dealing with traders, dealing with small women landowners that I spoke about yesterday, building these power plants, these food tech boxes that a lot of countries are going to need in the face of climate change. But how do we meaningfully bring those people together and then have people like us who are the idea people who know how to build startup innovation clusters, like manage startups and mentor them and connect them to investors? That's our role. How to bring everybody together in meaningful ways to actually speed up how fast we can do this, right? And I'll close my talk by saying the reason I'm interested in this region, even though our company is registered in Seattle, I've operated in Seattle for a long time, is that this region is the one that is in need of these solutions faster than the rest of the world. Right? Climate change is going to affect this region more. The growing divide between rich and poor is affecting these regions more. Right? Our need for trade is in this region more. And fair trade, the imbalance of fair trade is affecting all of these regions more. Right? And innovators mixed with a for-profit, for-mission type of focus, that these companies are there for profit, but they're here to actually, unshackle some of these boundaries and create new market opportunities. That's how I believe we can solve it. So I look forward to working with all of you and speaking to all of you about how we can get it done, and I look forward to discussing this more with our panel. Thank you so much, and I will now switch over to our panel.